Hey scholars, it's good to be back with you. And today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how to finish guitars, or really how to finish wood in general. Now it can be a little intimidating at first because it seems like there's, approximately a squillion different things you can put on wood to finish it. Well, it's actually not that hard. I'm going to help you cut through the background noise here. And where we're going to start is to remember why you finish wood to begin with. There's really only two reasons. The first is to protect it, and the second is to make it look good. Well, we protect it from what? Well, dirt, oil. There's oil in your hands. You might spill something on it, water, sun, all kinds of things. Now, if wood is protected enough from the environment, it doesn't need any finish. That table back there doesn't have any finish on it. Got a wood rack over there with no finish on it. They're fine. They're never going to leave this little room. In fact, you're seeing essentially all of my shop. I'm not going to get anything on them. They're not going to get wet. So they really don't need to be protected from anything. So the next reason is to make a guitar look good. Well, that's pretty important. Guitars look good sometimes when they're tinted different colors or painted. And a lot of times people like that real shiny, almost wet look finish. I prefer a little bit more of a satin finish on it, and that's okay too. In fact, on the neck, sometimes you'll put a different surface finish than on the rest of the body because your hand doesn't always like feeling that real slick, wet look, gloss finish. Oil often works better on a neck, or something at least feels like oil. So those are pretty good reasons why you'd use different materials. The other thing to think about when you're looking at all these kinds of different materials is if you're thinking about which ones to use, you might be asking the wrong question. I've seen guitars finished with every substance you can imagine, and most of the time it works just fine. I'm sitting here trying to think of a guitar where the finish was just absolutely so insufficient you had to sand it back off and try again, and nothing's coming to mind. So you can finish a guitar with just about anything reasonable. So the question hopefully you should be asking isn't what should I finish it with, but what process should I use once I've selected the finish. A very good luthier told me one time that it's much more important to get good at using whatever finish you pick than which finish you pick. So if you're spending a lot of time on internet chats and websites and stuff, sweating over the details of what's the perfect finish to pick, you're probably missing the point. Pick one. Every one will have advantages and disadvantages, and as long as you know how to apply it, how to repair it, and how to live with it, it's going to be fine. Right? So pick what you want, it'll probably work. Now if this is your first time out of the chute, well, there's some finishes that are easier to work with than others. So here's a quick rundown of some of the finishes available to you. If you're involved in the STEM guitar project, you might have seen that we use this a lot. This is floor finish. Floor finish on a guitar? Well, here's the thing. The finish doesn't know that it's on a guitar or on a floor, it's just on wood. Well, the same kinds of mechanical properties that make a finish good for floors also make it good for guitars. It needs to be easy to apply. It needs to dry to a nice hard state so it isn't going to scratch very easily. You need to be able to clean it, and it's nice if you can sand it and buff it to a nice finish. Well, floor finish works great. This is a water-based polyurethane. This is a varnish oil. This is spray polyurethane. This is tried and true. I'll talk about that in a minute. This is my bottle of iced tea. You really can't finish a guitar with this, so let's take that out. So the big idea here is you can divide finishes into two classes. Is there chemistry? Is there no chemistry? So the no chemistry finishes are ones that have solids dissolved in a solvent, and then when the solvent evaporates, what you got left is the solids. I have some. I use shellac for, oops, I got the lid's not on all the way. I use shellac, right here, to seal a lot, and this is Dewaxed Shellac. Shellac is just a bug byproduct, bug dutes pretty much, dissolved in alcohol. Now, I buy Dewaxed Shellac flakes and I dissolve them in 100% ethanol. In fact, if you go to guitar shops, a lot of times you'll see a bottle of Everclear on the shelf. Well, that doesn't mean the guitar repair guy is getting hammered all the time, probably. They're using that as a solvent, and it's a very pure solvent. It doesn't have anything else in it but ethanol. Ethanol is, well, it's toxic in large quantities, but it's not toxic as far as solvents go. and there's nothing else in there. So it's a nice thing to use. I use this a lot. It's the no chemistry finish. When the ethanol dissolves, what you got left is shellac. The same flakes that went in it now are just on the guitar. It soaks in nicely. The other no chemistry finish that you see a lot is lacquer. Now, it's nitrocellulose, usually, dissolved in this just toxic brew of all kinds of chemicals that form lacquer thinner. So lacquer's been around for a long time, works fine. The only hitch is it's not always terribly easy to apply, and it's not safe for closed spaces. You need a spray booth, or you need to do this outside. I would never spray lacquer in this little room. So that's the no chemistry stuff. I'm going to put this out of the way here. Most finishes do have chemistry. When they dry, they're chemically different than they were when they came out of the can or the bottle. So this stuff, it's called waterborne. It's not really water. It's actually got ethylene glycol and some other stuff in it. But it's close enough to water that waterborne is a handy descriptor of it. And when it dries, it goes through something called cross-linking that I don't know enough chemistry to really be able to describe. But it basically reacts with the oxygen in the air so that when it's hardened, it's chemically slightly different than it was when it came out of the bottle. So all this stuff I've got here on the table, there's chemistry here. Not only a little, it's usually just oxidation. Next thing you want to know is, what is it made out of? Basically, it boils down to either oil or quasi-water. I'll call it water even though it isn't. It's almost always one of the two. So polyurethane is an oil-based. It's got oil distillates in it, and it's got polyurethane, basically plastic, in it, so that when you put polyurethane on, oil-based polyurethane, the drying takes place in basically two steps. The first is the solvent evaporates off, and the second one is this oxidation reaction. So when it hardens, you're done. Oil paints dry the same way. They're a coloring agent, just a powder really, in an oil binder. And in the old days, that oil was like linseed oil or something, or walnut oil. Artists still use that stuff. So the oil finish that I use in my shop is called Tried and True. It's a varnish oil, and it's absolutely non-toxic. I don't think you could drink it, but maybe you could. You can definitely use this on cutting boards and stuff. These others are various types of either oil finishes or waterborne finishes. This one's called Tried and True Original, and this is linseed oil with beeswax. This is great stuff. You probably could eat this. Don't, but you definitely can finish cutting boards and stuff with it. And it's sold by the guitar suppliers. This makes pretty good guitar finish, and you cannot screw this up. There's nothing you can do to mess this up. There's almost nothing you can do to mess this up either. These others are water-based, and they come in of different types here. This is the Bono floor finish, and this Bono is just the name of the company, and they've got a couple different products. This is, this is a semi-gloss that I use in the guitar lab, and that we use in the stem guitar project a lot. Works great. This is just Minwax one-coat polyurethane from the hardware store. Works fine. This is Varthane. It's pretty much the same stuff thinned down and put in a spray can, so it's a rattle can here. You can use that. And this is a wipe-on poly from StuMac that's formulated specifically for guitars. It's a little thinner than these, goes on real easy. Pretty hard to mess this stuff up either. The reason I use these is because you see my shop. You can see almost the whole thing. Behind the camera there's a toolbox and a couple of cabinets, but that's it. This is it. This is where I do all my work. There's no spray booth in here. So spraying's just not on the menu when I'm working at home. Even the guitar lab where it is right now here at Purdue doesn't have a spray booth in it. So if I spray, I have to go out on the loading dock. Well, depends on what the weather's like, could be raining. So I don't spray much there anymore either. So everything I use has to have two characteristics. The first is I have to be able to wipe it on, and I mean wipe it on. I use a paper towel or a piece of old t-shirt almost exclusively. And the other one, since this is my home, my family lives here, I can't have chemicals in here. There's VOCs are the term you hear. That's volatile organic compounds, and they're not good for you. So the stuff I use is zero VOC or awfully close. I used to use lacquer at home, and then we had kids, and I'm not doing this anymore. There's nothing in here worth endangering people for. Now maybe where you are, if you have students or you're working at home, you may have the same concerns. So all the stuff I'm going to show you works great. It's pretty benign stuff. You probably don't want to get it on you. Maybe wear some rubber gloves just to keep it off you. But that's as much for just convenience so you don't get stuff all over your fingers as anything else. So the big idea here is whichever one you pick, and you can pick any of these, any of them will work, learn how to use them. Now, how do you do that? Do you make a bunch of guitar bodies and mess them all up and have to make a bunch more guitar bodies? Well, if you wanted to, I guess you could. That's not a great way to go here. What I strongly suggest is get some little blocks to practice on. I have tons of these around, and I have tried these with all kinds of different finishes. What I'll typically do is write on them with a pencil to say what finish is going on it, finish it, and then keep it. I've got a cabinet back there that's got a stack of these things in it, so I can compare how different finishing materials act on the kind of wood I'm using. So for this demo, I've just got this is some of that really nice furniture grade birch plywood. It's mechanically pretty close to what we're using for the guitar bodies. So let's start working with that. I'm going to try a couple different finishes to show you how they work. So I'm going to pause here, move the camera, and I'm going to zoom in on my little blocks. Okay, we're all zoomed in on the workbench. Let's give this a try. Now, I've got a couple pieces of furniture grade plywood here. This is the nice stuff you get at the lumber yard or the hardwood store, and all the finishes I showed you earlier. Now, I strongly suggest that you practice on some of these and get your technique down on these. Your other choice is to practice on your guitar body. Now, that's fine if it works. If it doesn't work, you're going to wind up having to sand the finish off and try again. And there's no harm done there. You won't lose much thickness on the body. My personal best is finishing the same guitar body 4 different times before I got one I liked. And I'm sure somebody somewhere can beat me. So practice with these, makes sense. Now just to let you know, I've been doing this for a while. Here are a bunch of blocks I did a long time ago to check all these different finishes out. And what I did is I just wrote on the edges of what they were. And I tried different finishes on different woods to see what I liked and what I didn't like. This was really handy. This is only part of my collection. I've got about this many more again back in my cabinet behind the camera here. And I refer to these a lot. I go back to these a lot to see what worked and what didn't. So putting these finishes on, at least this collection of them, is about as easy as you think. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our block of wood and we're going to write right on it what the finish is. So let's start with the Bona Novia. So there. Right on the block, we know what it is, and the finish will be clear, so obviously you can see through this. So finish here, my high-tech applicator right here. You can pour this stuff into a little dish and use foam brushes if you want. I guess you can use bristle brushes, but it's kind of hard to clean those. Disposable foam ones are good. White rags, they're just used up t-shirts are great. In my little shop I use these, and this isn't any particular brand. I'm just using whatever the store brand is here, I guess. The glove. Now, this is probably pretty benign. It probably doesn't hurt to get it on you. Better to use this if for no other reason than if you get the stuff on you, you wind up peeling plastic off your fingertips for the rest of the day. So do this. Go. I'm left-handed. And we're going to do the obvious here. Take this, soak the towel with it. There we go. Use the hand with the glove on it. Get this out of the way. And just start wiping this on. There's nothing more to it than that. And the only hitch here is I'm going to pad over my pencil mark just so I don't smear it. The Bona comes with a little sieve in there to keep you from getting crunchies in the liquid, which is really good. So I'm just going to pad right there. Now you can't see this, but you can. The grain is now raised. Wood likes to absorb water, and when it does, it swells a little bit. So even though this was pretty smooth when I started, it's not now. It's a little rougher. So once in a while you'll see people really over sand guitar bodies before they finish them. And I've actually watched students go down to 400, 600 grit to get them just glass smooth before that first coat of finish goes on. It isn't going to hurt anything, but it's really a waste of time, since that first coat or two is going to swell the grain a little bit. Put 1 or 2 coats on and then sand it back with something finer. Before you put the finish on, there's no point in going beyond about 220. Anything finer than that is a waste. After the first couple of coats go on and they've hardened and you can sand, then it makes sense to go to finer finishes, because you're going to want to level the finish between every couple of coats, because when the finish starts to build, it's going to be a little rough. It might look like what's called orange peel. So before you go too far, every couple of coats, sand it flat, so that when I'm flat, meaning that it's cloudy everywhere and level, and then so the next coat will go on flat. There's no way to put a good finish over a bad preparation. You can't do it. So that's done. This is actually starting to dry right now. In ideal conditions, the Bona will dry really fast. A while back we did a workshop in California that was a warm, dry day. The stuff was drying in 5-8 minutes, something like that. In 10 minutes it was ready for another coat. So it's inside temperature here, and it's let's see, 38% humidity, so not super dry. Actually a little drier than you'd want for guitar making, but not too bad. This will be ready for another coat in another maybe half hour or hour, so you can build pretty quickly. Other question, how many coats do you need? Well, you need enough to protect the wood. I guess theoretically 1 would do it. 2 or 3 is probably a minimum. I've seen as many as 20. 20 is a lot. A couple to protect the wood, and more than a couple if you want to sand back and get that nice, smooth, shiny finish. But remember, that smooth, shiny finish is just there for aesthetics. There's no mechanical reason it needs to be there. It's just to make things look better. So if you're in a hurry, get 2, 3, 4 coats of this stuff on, sanded enough to make you happy, and you're good to go. So while this is drying, let's try something else. This is pretty much the same as the Bona, although it's thinner. Sometimes I pour it right out on the wood, so there's what it looks like. It's very watery, and I'm going to get a different towel here. You go through a lot of towels. I've decided that I go through about a half a roll of paper towels per guitar, and just wipe it down here just like before. And it's raising the grain again a little bit, but it'll dry pretty quickly. And all you got to do is the same thing. Put a couple coats on, sand it down smooth, and just keep building. Right? It's important to note that you want to put multiple thin coats on. Multiple thin coats are way, way better than trying to slap a really heavy coat of something on. The only finish I've ever seen you can put on a really heavy coat and have it work out is a 2-part catalyzed polyester that now comes in rattle cans. But that's not something you do inside. The smell will just kill you. So that's definitely an outside thing. So set that out there. Close this. By the way, always close the lids. This stuff will dry in the bottle. Another one I forgot to tell you is there's a clear top coat you can use too from StuMac. Very similar to the Bona Novia. If you don't know what else to do, this stuff is great. Just use this and don't worry about it. Get good at it. This is water-based polyurethane from the hardware store. Very similar to these other ones. It behaves the same way. Probably doesn't dry as hard, but it works fine. I don't have oil-based polyurethane here. I thought I had some when I went to shoot the video. It turns out it had gone hardened in the can, so I pitched it. But it works about the same way, with the exception, well, with 2 exceptions really. One is that it's not zero VOC. There are volatile organic compounds that come off of polyurethane, so you probably want to use it in a ventilated space. The other one is getting rid of the rags. This stuff, when it dries, it just dries. Anything that's got a drying oil in it, like polyurethane or linseed oil or something like that, gives off a little bit of heat when it dries, which normally isn't a problem. But if you wad a bunch of rags up, or paper towels, and then throw them in a trash can so they're nice and insulated and the heat doesn't have any place to go, it's possible they can get hot enough to combust. Now, it's rare, but it's nasty when it happens. So if you're using a drying oil, like a polyurethane or linseed oil or something like that, open up the rags, sit them out on the table, and when they've dried, you can feel it, the finish is hardened. Then you can pitch them, and it's safe. Rattle can, same as this other stuff, only you spray it. So these are all chemically very similar to one another. The two that I just love here are both by a company called Tried and True. This is Tried and True varnish oil, and this is old school varnish oil similar to what was used hundreds of years ago. It's boiled linseed oil, and unlike the stuff you buy in the hardware store, this doesn't have any heavy metal dryers in it. The stuff you buy in the hardware store and some of the other places has what used to be called Japan dryer in it, and they're salts of heavy metals. Makes them dry faster, but now you've got heavy metals in them, and that's not too good. This stuff doesn't have that. So the upside, a lot safer. Downside, it takes a lot longer to dry. This stuff is 24 hours before you can recoat. Love it though. As long as you're not in a hurry, it's pretty hard to screw this up. In fact, it's nearly impossible. This stuff, I don't think it's possible to screw this up. I just don't know how you would do it. This is also by Tried and True, and it's called Tried and True Original. In fact, Stumac sells this stuff. Some guitar suppliers sell this stuff. It's a beeswax mixed in with the same boiled linseed oil that goes in this stuff. I don't think you could eat it, but in fact, you probably shouldn't try it, but it's definitely very safe. Both of these are approved for cutting boards. These are both approved for indirect contact with food, so they're about as safe as finishes could be. And the nice part about it is they're both used approximately the same way. So I'll start with this stuff. Now this stuff is really thick. It goes on like a really thick, almost molasses. And my little lid here plugged, so I'll just pour it out so you can see how thick this stuff is. There are some simple but complete instructions on their website that are a little longer than what's on the bottle. Just do what it says. Don't try to improvise. Just do whatever it says on the website, and it's going to work out fine. So with this stuff on there, all you got to do now is take your paper towel. I go through a lot of paper towels. And you can see how thick, I got a little crunchy on there. You see how thick this stuff is. It's hardly running, and that's that beeswax. And so you wipe this on, and it goes on really thick. And in fact, the words they say on the website are that if you've used any, you've used enough. And I think that's probably true. I certainly don't know why that wouldn't be. And it goes on here kind of thick, kind of gummy, and it smells like beeswax and linseed oil. And the instructions are, I think you let this sit for 60 minutes, and after 60 minutes, you burnish it with a clean cloth. You actually buff it. And after you've buffed it, you can put some more on it if you want. You can put any number of coats on this that you want. A couple is enough. It's probably pretty hard to get this stuff to build. Also, these two don't result in shiny finishes. These are a very satin finish. I recently finished a neck with this stuff, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to use anything but this on necks. It just feels like silk. I mean, just great stuff. So that's the Tried and True Original on one side. Let's go to the Tried and True Varnish oil on the other side. And see, it has this nice amber color to it. One thing to remember about the water-based finishes is they're crystal clear. They don't really change the color of the wood much. Anything with an oil in it, like this stuff or polyurethane, will darken the wood a little bit, gives it a little bit of an amber tone to it, which I kind of like. A lot of people like it, so it's not a problem. Now this I wouldn't try to pour out. Just get some on the rag like that. Oops, wrong side. Interesting. There, that's the side I should have finished on. Interesting. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I guess we'll find out. I'll wipe it down here in a bit. And this stuff goes on. Now, the instructions say to a very, very thin coat, and they're not kidding. They're not kidding at all. Use very thin coats and let them dry. Again, this stuff isn't going to build. You aren't going to get that super thick finish that you can buff to a shine. This is always going to look like an oil finish, but it's super easy to apply, pretty much impossible to screw up. And if there's ever a problem with it, just get the can out and wipe some more on. It's no big deal. So it's very, very easy to maintain. And this has, certainly stood the test of time. Human beings have been using this stuff for probably millennia. So there you go. There's some different finishing options. And remember, the important idea here is if you're spending too much time sweating over which finish to use, you're probably asking the wrong question. Much better to pick a finish you like, and everybody's going to pick something different most likely, but find one you like, pick that one, and stick with it. Learn to use it. It's going to work out fine. Hope this helps, and we'll talk to you next time.